Welcome to Salt Fitness Podcast, and this is Coach Liu here. And today we will be talking about one of the most popular topics in the fitness industry: fat loss. So, you probably already know that to lose fat and to lose weight, you need to be in a caloric deficit. That means spending more energy than you consume. But there is more to it than just cutting calories. Today, we are diving into how things like metabolic adaptations and the effects of different macronutrients play a role in fat loss. Understanding this can help you figure out what type of diet will work best for you, and it will help you to tackle those frustrating plateaus. Let's get started by talking about different types of body fat and how they affect fat loss. There are 5 types of fat. First, this is essential fat. That's the fat that is located in your bones, nerves, and cell membranes of all organs. Women usually have 6 to 8% more of that type of fat because of childbearing and hormonal functions. But that doesn't affect your skin fold. That means that even when you see a lean female, like female competitors, they can look just as shredded as males, but they will still have more body fat in their body. The second body fat type is brown adipose tissue, or brown fat burns calories by creating heat, which is not the same as white fat, which stores energy. Adults have small amounts of brown fat, typically located around shoulder blades and neck. It is believed that people with more brown fat burn more calories and resist weight gain a lot better. Certain conditions like exposure to cold, exercise, and consuming stimulants like caffeine can activate brown fat, and it can help increase energy expenditure. Now, the next 3 types of fat are the ones that you do need to remember. One of them is the visceral fat. It is stored in the abdominal cavity around the vital organs, and it is linked to higher risks of chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes. And this type of fat is the easiest one to lose because of a good blood flow in this area. And people often see quick reductions in waist size without seeing the difference in their skin fold when they just start out losing weight. Next body fat type is subcutaneous fat. This is the fat under the skin that most people think of when they actually think of body fat. This is the type of fat that often covers your muscles. And that's what you mean when you say you want to get a toned body. You want to lose subcutaneous fat. There are 2 types of subcutaneous fat. This is regular and stubborn. And usually the leaner you are, the harder it becomes to lose this fat. And yes, you heard it correctly. There is such thing like stubborn body fat. There is the last type of fat, which is intramuscular fat. Right now, at this point, I don't want to overload you with unnecessary information. So just know this type of fat also exists. It's located in your muscles, and it would be especially a concern for you if you lead a heavily sedentary lifestyle. So fat burning is a 3-step process. We've got lipolysis, or it's also called mobilization. The second step is transportation, and oxidation. We have fat. So triglyceride. It is located in fat cell, which is called adipocyte. And when we get in the deficit of calories, our body produces hormones that releases fat out of fat cell. That's your first step, which is mobilization or lipolysis. Then the fat transports through the blood vessels into mitochondria, and that's your transportation phase. In mitochondria, fat oxidizes where it gets broken down into 2 things: water and carbon dioxide. When it happens, it releases energy that our body uses for whatever it needs. Water, we sweat it out, we pee it out, and carbon dioxide, we breathe out. Technically, to get rid of 10 kilos fat, we need to breathe in 29 kilos of oxygen and breathe out 28 kilos of carbon dioxide and have 11 liters of water, just this bottle, this whole bottle, leave our body. But let's not forget, this is not possible without having the deficit of calories. That's how fat leaves our body. The fat cells, however, so when the fat leaves our body, these are our fat cells, they don't go anywhere. They get filled with water. But then what happens, eventually, water leaves our body and they shrink. This is why a lot of people give up way too early, because they see no weight loss when in fact they probably already lost a whole heap of fat. Fat cells had water in it, and now the water is gone. The fat was gone before that, and the cells shrink and you lose that weight. What happens with the cells after they shrink? They stay there as a storage. So when you go in a deficit of calories, your body can store fat again as fuel, just in case for its future needs. Now let's talk about the stubborn fat. Why does it exist and what can we do with it? How can we maximize the burning process of that stubborn fat? Imagine your body is like a factory and you've got various departments. They need to be managed. We have messengers that tell your body how to manage energy and how to manage fat. Those messengers, they carry important instructions from the management, from your boss, which is the brain and adrenal glands, and they carry that information and instructions to different departments like various tissues and organs in your body. So the messengers I'm talking about are called catecholamines. When these messengers are sent out into the factory, when they're sent out into the bloodstream, they need to find the right doors to deliver their messages. These doors are called adrenoceptors, and there are two main types of adrenoceptors. We've got alpha receptors and beta receptors. So we've got beta receptors, they generally promote the fat burning and they promote activity, while alpha receptors, they slow these processes down. They slow down the fat burning. Certain areas of your body, the hips and thighs if you are a woman, and the abdomen for men, those types of these areas of your body, they have more alpha 2 receptors. These areas are harder to slim down because they have alpha 2 receptors that slow down the process of burning fat. Blood flow to these areas is also controlled by these receptors, and areas with more alpha 2 receptors, they tend to have poorer blood flow, making it even harder to mobilize and burn fat, which is in contrast with visceral fat, the fat around your organs. You remember that one? It has less alpha 2 receptors, it has better blood flow, and it's easier to lose it. In obese individuals, the alpha 2 receptors are more common in subcutaneous fat, the fat under the skin. And this actually might explain why they lose visceral fat first when they start losing weight. If we have moderate weight loss and calorie restriction, it can actually reduce the sensitivity and it can reduce the number of alpha 2 receptors, which makes it easier to lose subcutaneous fat over time. Now, what can we do to help us burn fat? Something practical. We've got hormones that play an important role in fat burning. That's norepinephrine and epinephrine. Great news, exercise helps us to boost those hormones, norepinephrine and epinephrine, and it helps us to burn fat better. So to effectively burn stubborn fat, it is best to start with high intensity exercise so you can release the fat out of the cells. You follow by low intensity exercise to burn the fat. So high intensity exercise on its own, it can shift the body to use glucose instead of fatty acids, instead of fat. And that's why combining it with low intensity exercise, it's much more effective for burning fat. Let me quickly explain how we know what's high intensity exercise, what's low intensity exercise. How do we practically implement that? So when we talk about the intensity of exercise, I like to use heart rate. Most of us have heart rate monitors in our Fitbits and watches, and if you don't, or if you want something more practical, you can invest in a heart rate monitor. I'll put a link below for the heart rate monitor I use on my clients during my PT sessions. Invest in a heart rate monitor or check your Fitbit. Listen to the next part. When we are born, our heart rate max is 220, and each year it decreases. To learn what's your heart rate max right now, take 220 and subtract your age. For me, my heart rate max is currently 196 because I'm 24 years old. 220 minus 24, 196. So when I talk about the high intensity exercise, I usually refer to 80 to 95% of your heart rate max, which is for me is about 156 and 186 beats per minute. When moderate intensity is about 70% of your heart rate max. Again, for me, it's 137 beats per minute. And low intensity is about 50 to 60% of your heart rate max, which is 98, 117 beats per minute for me. If you are older, your numbers will be lower. If you're younger, they will be higher. You'll just have to do a bit of math here. Or your heart rate monitor can actually tell you the levels of intensity too. When you engage in very high intensity activities like sprinting or heavy lifting, your body relies on glucose as its primary energy source. This happens for up to about 2 minutes. During these intense bursts, your muscles use glucose that is stored in the form of glycogen in your muscles and your liver. This quick access energy is vital for powering through these short, explosive efforts. For activities that are moderate to high intensity, like a fast run, glucose continues to be main energy source for about 20 minutes. As you push through these workouts, your body burns through the glycogen stores, burns through the glucose to keep you going. But now, here's where it gets interesting. As you continue exercise, if the intensity becomes more moderate, your body starts to shift its energy use. While glucose is still being used, fat becomes a significant fuel source. This is great news for anyone who wants to shed those stubborn kilos off, which is basically for anyone who's listening to this episode. To summarize, during high intensity exercise, your body uses glucose for the first 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, if the intensity is reduced, your body begins to use more fat for energy. Understanding how your body switches between these energy systems is key to optimizing the workouts for fat loss. High intensity efforts will burn through the glucose quickly, while longer and moderate intensity sessions can help you to tap into the fat stores. This is how I do it. I do my strength training however long it takes, even if it takes longer than 20 minutes. And then I throw in a 20-30 minute cardio. Moderate to low intensity cardio, I keep my heart rate about 60 to 70% of my heart rate max. That helps me to maximize fat burning without sacrificing my performance when I lift weights. and also it helps me to avoid injuries. Now, as you can now appreciate, there is more to fat loss than simply creating a calorie deficit. And due to different receptors on fat cells, the receptors we talked about, the alpha 2 and beta 2 receptors, it is harder to mobilize fat from certain parts of the body. If we are in a caloric deficit and we can't get the fats out of the fat cells, then we're at much greater risks of muscle loss, which we definitely don't want to lose because muscles are so important for our health and longevity. This is why in this episode I spoke in details about fat loss, not the weight loss. But with all of this in mind, it is very important to maintain the calorie deficit first. Look at how it works for you and then add the information I provide here to maximize and optimize the fat loss. To learn more about what is caloric deficit, how to calculate it, how to calculate the right amount of macronutrients for your body type and for your goals, I am right now creating Nutrition 101 Masterclass. So let me know in comments if that's something that you'd be interested in. Stay motivated, keep moving, keep pushing, and remember, consistency is key. Hit that thumbs up button if you found this episode helpful and subscribe to my channel to learn everything you need to know about resistance training and nutrition.